Mayan alphabet. Write your name. These are 4 versions of my name in Mayan, and the goal is after these 2 videos that you too will be able to write a couple versions of your own name that you can use as a signature for yourself. Let's start off by looking at who the Mayans were. In this picture you see this amazing Mayan pyramid that hovers over the jungle in southern Mexico. This is where the Mayans began to develop about 2,000 years ago, and they had this amazing ability to build huge buildings that were pyramids that got them closer to the gods. And up on the top there you can see they have a little building almost where the priests would be, and that is where often they would write their manuscripts. The Mayan were a really complex civilization. They developed over time, but they had warriors, priests, merchants, and farmers who grew corn and squash and beans. And having this stable food supply allowed them to begin to develop writing. They wrote on stone as well as on paper. And each one of these images is called a glyph. And one glyph is a drawing that represents an idea or a sound that a person can make. And why is this such a big deal? Let's just kind of get an idea of how big of a deal it was that in Mexico they invented writing on their own, independent of any other civilization. There are only 5 civilizations that did that originally. Let's look at where those were on the map so we can kind of appreciate the development of the Mayan culture. The Sumerians, they developed their own style of writing. The Egyptians, Harappan was in the Indus Valley in India. China developed their own language, and the Maya also developed their own language. These are the 5 main civilizations that created their own language, and that's a big deal. That puts the Maya in pretty good company. What allowed them to be able to do this, to develop this writing? I mentioned just a second ago the fact that they farmed gave them time to be able to start to develop their thoughts and be able to develop this writing. In order to have crops, you have to have big rivers, a water supply. So the Sumerians had the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. The Egyptians had the Nile River. The Harappan had the Indus and the Indus Valley in India. China had the Yellow River. This is where their civilization started about 5,000 years ago. And the Maya didn't have rivers. They had rivers, but their main source of stable water supply was what they call a cenote. It's just a big hole in the ground, and in the ground there's water waiting right there. So the water system would be underground that they had access to, that they used for their crops as well as their own drinking water. So in that sense, the Mayans are just a little bit different in how they developed their water supply for the crops that allowed them to design their writing system. Here's an example of what Sumerian cuneiform writing looks like. Egyptian hieroglyphs, Harappan script, Chinese symbols, and the Mayan. You can see in some regard they're similar, in some regard they're different. What they all have in common is that they are symbols. Each one of those different marks is a symbol that represents either a sound or an idea. And that's the key to the different kind of writing systems. You can see that the Egyptian hieroglyphs and the Maya hieroglyphs kind of look the same in the sense that they have images that they also put together with the drawings or with the glyphs. So the writing and the images put together would go together to tell the story that they are trying to convey. So far we have the Mayans. They live in southern Mexico. They had an advanced civilization. They had a water supply. They began to write both on stone, but they also wrote books. They had 30,000 books as far as we know by the time that Christopher Columbus showed up in 1492. The downside for the Maya was that when Christopher Columbus showed up, a lot of the Mayans were killed and their books were burned. The Spanish arrived, killed them, worked them to death. They brought in diseases that the Mayans didn't have any immunity toward. Just a lot of them died after the arrival of the Spanish. And there was one priest in particular that was Spanish that burned almost all 30,000 of the books. And that is a travesty to all the knowledge that was lost at that time, that they could have, instead of learning about the Mayans, they decided to burn all the books and not learn about the Mayans. There are only 4 Mayan codices left that we know of. There's the Dresden Codex, the Paris Codex, the Madrid Codex, and the Grolier Codex. And these codices are named after the cities where they are still being held. So the Dresden Codex is in Dresden, Germany. The Paris Codex is in Paris, France. The Madrid Codex is in Madrid, Spain. The only one still in Mexico is the Grolier Codex. And that one still is the most recent one found. And there's still some controversy over whether that's a legitimate Mayan codex or not. And there are people that are trying to still solve that mystery. The reason why we call these a codex, and plural is codices, instead of a book is because of how they're put together. They're not like a scroll where they're rolled, or a book where they're bound. They're a codex, so they're folded flat. You can unfold them and fold them like an accordion. That's what makes them a codex. These codices were all burned by the Spanish, and based on these 4 codices that we have left, we try to redecipher and figure out what they were trying to say. And there's a whole series of individuals who spent their entire lives trying to decipher these Mayan texts. One of them is an interesting character. His name's Yuri Norosov. He got his hands on this book, which was a recreation of one of the Mayan codices, which in it had a series of Mayan drawings from the different codices, and he started to just stare at this and try to figure out what these were trying to say. And he was important in understanding that some of these symbols were sounds, some of them were just symbols for ideas, and some of them were numbers. He was the first one to kind of begin to piece together what the different objects were within the page of a codex. He didn't go ahead and fully decipher the meaning, but he was one of the first steps. Another individual was Michael Coe. For 90 years, he studied this all the way up to the very end. He was trying to figure out, even with the Grolier Codex, is this original or is this a fake? What is this? So he is another big key player in the decipherment and the meaning of these Mayan writings. Another scholar of Mayan glyphs is Mark Van Stone. He not only understands how glyphs are formed, what they mean, but he can also draw them beautifully. He is one of many, many, many people, men and women from all over the world that have gone to Mexico, that have studied in the jungles, on the pyramids, reading the books, and have formed a group all around the world to try to understand what is it that we're reading, what did the Mayans want to communicate, and can we understand what they're saying? And the truth is, yes, they figured out an awful lot of what the Mayans wrote down, what they were trying to say, and what they were communicating. And we now know a lot of information about the Mayans that was just pure mystery just 100 years ago. The Mayans have a lot of surprises for us. For example, the upper class got to drill holes in their teeth and put precious metal in their teeth, gold and silver and different metals and stones. These grills are 2,000 years old. We were certainly not the first ones to decide that we can do something cool with our teeth and create a grill for ourselves. The Mayans had done this thousands of years ago. The upper class also got to squish their skull flat and squished it out the back so their heads look kind of like an alien. I'm sure it would be fascinating to see individuals like that, but that was only allowed for the upper class. And in this middle skull, you can also see that the teeth have the either metal or stone in their teeth as well. And if all this talk about skulls kind of freaks you out and creeps you out a little bit, you better get used to it. The skull plays a big part in Mexican art today and Central American art as they celebrate not only life, but they also celebrate death, and they make fun of death, and they face it, and they have conversations with it. And it's just a much bigger part of their life than it is for many other cultures around the world. And if you think Mayans are just something that you study in the past, that's not correct. There's 6 million Mayans all over the world, primarily in Honduras, Guatemala, Mexico, and Belize. But also in the United States, there are tens of thousands of Mayans that live here in the United States. There are 6 Mayan languages spoken in the United States as well as in Central America. So this is something that's worth studying, not only for what you can learn about people from a long time ago, but how that's influenced the people of Mexico today. And they have a 2,000-year history that they can be very proud of to look back at and say, you know, hey, we have ancestors that were one of the first 5 civilizations to come up with writing and advanced civilization. It was right here in Mexico. And that's a big deal. In the next video, we're going to go look right at the script itself, and I'm going to show you how to write your own name then using the Mayan script so that you can come up with one single glyph that's really cool that you can use to represent yourself.